It's Monday, and that so happens to be the day that I like to talk about monsters. I'm Jeff Arbuckle, and this is Monster Mondays, presented to you by Film Seizure. You can catch new episodes of Film Seizure with myself and Jason Oliver on Wednesdays, but Mondays are for me to talk about monster movies. Oh, hey, look who it is. Hellboy is back on Monster Mondays. In 2008, Guillermo del Toro made a sequel to his much appreciated Hellboy film. What's interesting, though, is that 2004's Hellboy didn't really perform all that well. It's likely that the movie was kind of squashed by the runaway train of that spring, The Passion of the Christ, and there wasn't a great deal of extra money lying around for a relatively obscure comic book film. Still, it did well with fans and on home video, so Del Toro got to do Hellboy II, The Golden Army. However, it would take 4 years for the sequel to see the light of day. A lot of the reason for this was that Revolution Pictures, the production company who made the first, did not get their distribution deal renewed by Columbia Pictures. So they refocused their efforts on other things, and Hellboy floated away with no distributor. Eventually, Universal came along with a new deal for the film. It probably didn't hurt that Del Toro's Pan's Labyrinth earned multiple Oscar nominations in that whole process or during that whole downtime. And the guy now had some pretty good clout and could get his stuff made. Also, can I just point out that I really love the idea that Hellboy 2 was distributed by Universal? Universal sure does have an affinity for monsters. But guess what? Del Toro originally wanted to explore some concepts for the Hellboy sequel that would have Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, and the Wolfman appear. Wouldn't that have been just swell for Universal to have brought back those old classic monsters through a Hellboy movie? That would have warmed my heart. But anyway, Mike Mignola and Del Toro first thought about adapting one of Mignola's comics, but since Del Toro was pretty busy with Pan's Labyrinth and was thinking it might just be best to create a brand new original story instead of citing it, would be easier to do so. So this idea of the Golden Army basically came along. This wasn't Hellboy dealing with his past of being basically summoned by Nazis. This was more along the lines of folklore and fairy tales that several Hellboy stories would ultimately rely on over the years. It brings the BPRD straight up against gods and legends of old threatening to return to the world. Many people returned to their roles. Ron Perlman was back as Hellboy, Selma Blair was back as Liz Sherman, Doug Jones was back as the physical embodiment of Abe Sapien, and this time, though, Jones got to also be the voice of Abe as well. Jeffrey Tambor returned as the director Tom Manning, the head of the BPRD, and John Hurt came back for a brief scene as Hellboy's adoptive father, Trevor Brutenholm. So the gang was all back, and the opportunity to tell a bigger, more expansive story was on the way. What's more, Hellboy II: The Golden Army was also liked more in several ways than the first. While some critics felt that the movie was maybe a little noisier or a little less focused than the first, it played up to those ideas for a wilder ride and relished the fun of the fantastical world that Del Toro was playing with. Many Hellboy fans were pretty satisfied too, and the summer release of the film probably also helped the box office returns, and it ended up grossing considerably more than the first on only a slightly higher budget. All signs pointed to a third Hellboy from Del Toro. Sadly, that wouldn't come to pass. Instead, it would be 2 animated features and the lackluster reboot from 2019. I've covered one of the 2 animated movies and that reboot, so check that out in the back catalog of Monster Mondays episodes. The movie opens on Christmas Eve, 1955. Young Hellboy is watching some Howdy Doody and wanting to stay up to see Santa Claus arrive. Professor Brutenholm convinces him to go to bed with a story about an old war between humans and creatures. Elf King Baelor commissioned the creation of an army of golden mechanical warriors that messed up humans. Baelor regretted his decision and forged a treaty with the humans instead and broke up the crown that was used to control the mechanized army. Nuada, a ranking member of the elves and a dissenting voice in the truce, not trusting humans, leaves in exile, promising to return when his people needed him the most. And now, in the present, an auction is taking place that is selling part of the crown to control the Golden Army. Prince Nuada returns from exile to claim the peace. Meanwhile, at the BPRD, Hellboy's got some problems. First, he's in a bit of a jam with Manning over his penchant for liking to be seen and posing for pics and signing things for witnesses. He's also got relationship problems with Liz, as they often argue over how they have to live in this cramped vault in the basement of the headquarters. And while investigating the robbery and dealing with cute but voracious tooth fairies, Abe touches Liz's stomach when protecting her from something in the walls and discovers that she's actually pregnant. As the BPRD deals with another public sighting of Hellboy as well as Abe and Liz, Nuada goes to King Baylor and states his intentions to fight the humans again. He kills his father to obtain the second piece of the crown, and his sister, Nuala, has the final piece and runs away to seek help. Due to the blowback of being seen in public, Washington sends Johann Kraus, an ectoplasmic expert who is basically just a gaseous guy inside a steampunk-like suit, almost like what you would expect steampunk guys to wear as like a diving suit or possibly even a spacesuit. Hellboy immediately dislikes Kraus for being overly by the book and how much reverence Abe and Manning seem to give him as well. Hellboy, Abe, and Strauss go looking for the entrance to the troll market to find out who obtained the tooth fairies, and when they enter, Abe sees Princess Nuala and follows her while Hellboy and Strauss struggle to get info. Abe finally meets Nuala and they share a psychic link to learn more about each other, but they were interrupted by Nuada's monster goon, and Hellboy eventually takes on the monster and kills him, and little creatures in the market report back to Nuada, who sicks an elemental forest god after Hellboy for killing his lackey. Killing the last of these plant elementals gives Hellboy a little bit of a pause, but by killing it, it creates this small patch of flora right in the middle of the city. But the ensuing chaos of everything that happened causes the people of the city to basically turn against Hellboy and the others. Abe and Hellboy get drunk over their relationship issues, Abe falling for Nuala, and Hellboy having some issues with Liz. Meanwhile, Nuada, who does have a psychic link with his twin sister, has arrived at the BPRD to collect the final piece of the crown. Nuada stabs Hellboy in a fight and makes off with Nuala. However, he doesn't have the final piece of the crown because she's hidden it at the BPRD. Abe finds the piece, but Kraus and Manning have orders not to go after the prince. However, Kraus has a change of heart and goes with Hellboy, Liz, and Abe to confront him. In order to save Hellboy from the shard of Nuada's blade that's still stuck in his torso, they meet an angel of death who removes the piece, but also warns Liz that Hellboy is someday going to destroy the world, and she's going to be the one who suffers the most. They confront Nuada, and Abe immediately gives up the final piece of the crown to save Nuala. The Golden Army activates, and Nuada orders the robots to kill them. Hellboy and Kraus do well to smash up a bunch of them, but they are able to repair themselves. So Hellboy challenges Nuada for command of the army. Hellboy won't kill Nuada, but because of their link, when Nuala stabs herself, she kills both of them. Before dying, Nuada does warn Hellboy that the humans will tire of him, and they've already begun to turn against him and the rest of the BPRD. Hellboy, Liz, Abe, and Strauss quit the BPRD, and Hellboy plans to find a place in the country to live with lots of room for his kid. But Liz says she's got twins cooking in that oven of hers. So let's get to those three things that I like about this movie. First up, I love the opening sequence. The story Hellboy is told on Christmas Eve 1955 is animated with these awesome computer-generated wooden puppets. It almost looks like something Tim Burton would have really kind of animated himself, if I'm going to be fair, but it's the perfect way to show a story being told and not having it to be told to us. And I just like stuff like that. It shows the imagination of both the filmmaker and the character hearing the story. It's almost being seen from a young boy's perspective, particularly because he's such a fan of Howdy Doody. Watching that on TV, then hearing the story, he's playing it out with these puppets, basically. I would, watch an entire movie from Del Toro in that style if it were up to me, to be honest with you. Second, I quite like the new monster scene in this movie. The little tooth fairies are perfect Del Toro creatures with cute little features, but will also eat everything of a person. They're described as being creatures that pretty much only eat and poop and eat again. There are different, almost alien-like creatures that hang out with King Baelor. You also have the entire troll market that is full of monsters of just about everything you can possibly imagine. There's even a thing that looks like a baby, but is actually a sentient tumor. There's a guy who looks like he's made out of wood. It's just glorious. Beyond that scene, there's also a jumping bean that grows into that giant plant god monster thing. And when they get into the entrance to the prince's hideout, there's a giant rock man that acts as a doorway. Inside the entrance, there is a uniquely Del Toro angel of death that is pretty terrifying to look at, really. Lastly, while this movie is a couple of minutes shorter than the first, it doesn't need to spend as much time building the characters and the world that the first one had to. In this movie, that time is used to have longer, larger action scenes, but also have lovely character moments. You have Abe Sapien falling in love with the princess, Hellboy having his relationship issues, and also learning about his greatest weakness from Strauss, who also knew his adoptive father. It makes for exactly what you want a sequel to be. Also, the whole warning to Liz about her suffering the most when Hellboy turns and begins destroying everything, and that's kind of chilling and adds a little gravitas to the whole thing. It's really superior to the first, and the first was pretty fun and great to begin with, so this really does everything a sequel should. Sadly, we will never know what that third movie would have been. So that wraps up this week's Monster Mondays. Until next week, I'll see you later. And don't forget to check out new episodes of Film Seizure every Wednesday and a new installment of Monster Mondays each Monday on filmseizure.com, as well as places where fine podcasts are found, like SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Spotify. And you can also check out new posts at my website, bmovieenema.com, each and every Friday.